fuck the system. The system is going to be there. We'll worry about that later. What do you want? What is something that is going to change your life?
Hey squirrels, welcome to AvyHD, where ADHD isn't some clinical diagnosis, it's just life. I'm Avy, your always honest tour guide through this beautiful mess. Over here, we're not about fixing yourself. We're about figuring out how to actually enjoy your life as you are. So grab a snack and let's go. Squirrels, let me describe a feeling to you. You wake up and you have your whole day mapped out. You know which kid needs what. You know which Slack message you're going to answer first. You know exactly which version of yourself is going to walk into the 9 a.m. meeting and which version of you walks into the school pickup and which version answers the phone when your mother calls. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, usually in the car at a red light or parked in your driveway, you think, this is it. This is the rest of my whole life. And if one thing drops, if I drop anything, everything is going to fall. And the most exhausting part isn't the juggling. It's that nobody, including you, realizes that you're performing anymore. Today, I'm sitting down with a counselor who works with women exactly like that. High achieving, often neurodivergent, and quietly running out of themselves. So let's get into it. I'm going to tell y'all how this one happened. Somebody pinged me on LinkedIn, which by the way is genuinely one of my favorite ways to meet people, and where my best guest conversations has started. And they told me you need to talk to Leah Walter. So I got curious and we set up a call, an AvyHD call, which is the first chat I have with anyone before I decide who comes on the podcast. And I met Leah. Leah Walter is a counselor. She works with neurodivergent professionals and specifically high achieving women in tech and corporate who are forcing themselves into structures that were never really built for them and then burning out trying to make their life look easy. Her specialty, and this is the part that made me sit up, is something she calls upward mobility loneliness, which is not her term, but it was the first time I had ever heard that term. And this is what happens when you're the first person in your family to make it into a new socioeconomic bracket, which means that you're isolated from your old support system because they don't understand the life you're living now. And you're isolated from your new support system because they don't understand the life that you came from. So you exist in this perpetual gap where nobody can hold the full picture of who you are. Most counselors will help you cope better with the system. Leah sits with you while you stop pretending that the system is working. And this is also Leah's first podcast appearance, which I bring up not as a disclaimer, but as a flex, because she said yes to me before saying yes to anyone else. And I'm taking that personally in the best possible way. Leah, I'm so glad you said yes. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. I was sitting there listening to that. It's so detailed. And I was like, yeah, that's basically my entire caseload. Yeah.
I love it. I want to start somewhere really specific. When you and I were on our preliminary call, we got to this moment. I'm sure I'm going to butcher the exact line, but it was something like, this is it. This is my whole life. And if I drop one thing, everything falls. And I want to start there because I think that a lot of the women who are listening to us might have just felt that in their chest.
Yeah. It's almost like you have become so important to everyone else. You can't be yourself.
In your practice, when does that juggle stop being a skill and start being like this kind of cage that you're describing?
Yeah, that is something that we learn about, and it comes through boundaries. So, when we're talking about boundaries, I've talked about boundaries from with little kids all the way up to elderly clients I had, and we're not taught boundaries very well in our society, if at all. And there seems to be this idea that, I do more. I just keep doing more, and everybody else around me is happier, or it's my job because nobody else is going to do it. And when we stop and we start looking at boundaries, we start recognizing what is actually mine and what is supposed to be somebody else. And that is the part where women, especially because of how we are socialized within our society, feel a lot of emotion because we're not taught to prioritize ourselves. We're not taught to make sure we're okay as they say, put on your own oxygen mask. And so that part is where things start to feel confusing in the fact that if I do put something down, someone is going to be missing something. And it is someone I care about. And it's someone I feel an obligation to. And that is when we have to take that step back and we have to start really looking at our relationships, our responsibilities, our energy, and start to say, where am I in all of that?
Ouch. Recognizing that something should be someone else's job or is supposed to be someone else's job almost feels like one more thing that I need to do. Like, then if I recognize that it's their job, maybe then I have to teach them how to do it.
Mhm. Yeah, I hear that a lot. They're like, it's just easier if I do it. Like, if I do it, it's going to be 2 minutes. If I have to tell someone else how to do it, I'm probably going to have to do it anyway. And I'm going to have this, long time of me teaching them. And that is something that you have to start learning to be okay with because you have a capacity and you will find it. It will be some big thing that happens. That's normally my first question when a client comes in, like, what happened to make you book this appointment today? And there's a lot of stories in that of, I got laid off. I found out my spouse was cheating on me, or I, had this moment and I couldn't call anybody. I didn't have anybody to call. And that piece is when people start changing their perspective and they start saying, like, oh, maybe the cost is greater than I'm really seeing. It's not just the 2 minutes that I gave up to go do that thing, but it is the 2 minutes that I did that and the 30 minutes I did something else and the hour I spent after work. And it just keeps building. And so, even though it is easier in that moment for me to say, I'll just make the bed, don't worry about it, the kids can't do it. You have to teach your kids how to do that. Otherwise, you're making the bed for 18 years. And if you have multiple kids, you're making all the beds for 18 years. And that might not seem like a big sacrifice, but when we start doing that habitually in patterns, we start recognizing how little space we have for ourselves in our lives. And so it is important for you to have that mindset shift to say that I am important enough to teach someone else to do this.
The moments that you described where people have this like moment and they're like, nah, I can't do this anymore. It sounds like a lot of them are externals, like something externally happened to kind of jar you sufficiently or to cause some more pain. And in all of them, it seems like I'm going to do a couple of thoughts in a train. So follow me, people. So if am, I'm going to take being laid off as an example, but it applies to all the examples. If I was just laid off and I am a high achieving, neurodivergent, often highly intelligent woman, then I probably put in a tremendous amount of effort. So my effort doesn't match the outcome that I'm expecting. And that same thing can be applied to being laid off, to your spouse cheating, to like your friends. I'm always there I always do the stuff for other people. So how could it be that they're not showing up for me in the same way?
That is a huge boundary thing, is that we think if I put this in, someone else will put this in. That's normally not how relationships work. We usually have an overfunctioner and an underfunctioner. And believe it or not, high achieving people are usually the overfunctioner. And so the other person doesn't see the need to do that. And if we had two overfunctioners in a relationship, it would not be a stable relationship, honestly. And same with two underfunctioners, it kind of just falls apart. So when we have someone who is an overfunctioner, they put a lot of their worth and their value into functioning in the relationship. And it is when that is taken away, that relationship, the opportunity, whatever it is, that is the moment that they start saying, what the fuck? I don't know if I can curse on this podcast, but I just did. Um,
Please. I like it.
Wonderful, because I tell all my clients, I curse like a sailor. Yeah, that moment is the moment that they start to recognize these relationships are lopsided. And when that happens, they're the ones that take the brunt of it. When you're the overfunctioning relationship, you get that much, you know, taken away from you when that goes away. And especially in corporate. Like, as you mentioned, like I work with people who are professionals and most of the time first generation professionals. So they were taught just do what you're supposed to do, go above and beyond, do all of these things, and you will be rewarded. And there is definitely a lot of education around relationships and intention and boundaries and all those things because that is a very old school mindset that doesn't work anymore. Like we are full capitalism now. So what they can get from you, they will take and they want to pay the least amount of money for it. And that makes someone who puts their worth in what they do feel real shitty. And that moment of starting to recognize people don't value me like I value them, that feels real shitty. And that is usually one of those moments where people feel like they have lost their identity or their life is kind of falling apart and they reach out for help. Unfortunately, I don't get a lot of conversations with people who are in great places in their life. It's usually those people that reach out. And I guess that is one of the harder things within my industry, but it is so rewarding to see someone go through the process of finding out who they are without leaning so much on everyone else.
That's the interesting thing about being in a great point in your life. Like, according to who? Yeah, and maybe externally great, and I can't really admit that I need anything. Even for a listo, it should be very, very low shame to bring in a distant assistant or a virtual assistant. It's just an employee. Like there's nothing in it that should have any sort of value judgment about who you are, how valuable you are, or how much capacity you have. And yet, when we live in this ingrained space of it's just me and myself, and like this is what I have, that can be very lonely because it feels to me almost that it's very easy to say people don't show up for me in the way that I show up for them or in the way that I expect or that I want or that I desire for them to show up for me. Therefore, I will always be alone.
Yeah. It usually turns into I'm not worth it. And it is based within judgment of ourselves. And people who are high achieving are usually probably somewhere near perfectionists. And that is just somewhere to sit so that you don't have to feel all the inside stuff. If I'm overachieving, if I'm busy all the time and I am hitting everybody else's metrics, I don't have to worry about what I think about myself or how I'm feeling. And reaching out for help usually comes when they feel like they just can't do it anymore. It is not, oh, I feel like I'm getting a little overwhelmed. I should ask for help. It is like, I cannot take one more breath in my life without help. And that is a sacrifice that we've been taught as women to make, and that's normal. And it's not normal to not feel happy and like your whole self in your life, especially if you're doing it for a paycheck, for someone's love, to just feel better about yourself. Those should not be the driving factors of how you are engaging. That is engaging out of fear and shame.
Specifically for, you were speaking about first generation professionals or first generation immigrants who are professionals. I was raised by the child of first generation. Like he was the first generation. So I was raised by first generation.
Mm, yeah.
And definitely I was a big challenge for my parents, who are both physicians and who saw this like very intelligent, capable person full of potential who would be a great doctor, but would be really suffer through medical school. Like, to get myself to a point where I would be a good doctor is a path that I wasn't willing to take. And they really, really struggled with my constant defiance of what I'm supposed to do. Just show up and do what you're supposed to do, and you're going to be fine. And I was inside a system telling them, like, that's not true. I don't know who told you that or when that was true, but it is just not true. But also it's the only rules they knew. They're just trying to teach me how to succeed.
Right. The generational curse of success.
Hmm.
And that that is what makes being a first generation anything really hard, because you don't have the support, or people don't know how to support you, and you're not following the rules. Like, just follow the rules. And that is
They
definitely
will if your rules make sense.
right. But that is where a lot of that work comes from, of, having a lot of family and, backstory type of therapy. I'm a solution focused counselor, so I focus a lot more on what's going on today. But that doesn't mean we never talk about that stuff like you were talking about that happened when you were growing up, or you were learning how to manage your emotions, or how you found value in yourself. And you can honor the fact that your parents were doing the best that they could, because they loved you. They wanted you to be successful. And you can also hold space for that part of you that wasn't enough for. And sometimes that part of you needs some healing, because that is the driving factor in why you're trying to achieve so much. You're trying to prove you made the right decision. I didn't have to become a doctor in order to be successful. So let me show you I'm successful by, overachieving in everything I do. And so a that is something that is so common. And with the upward mobility loneliness, that is being in this place that nobody else understands, because you are the first. The people who are or were your support system when you were, growing up, or trying to steer you towards something, they're maybe upset or confused, or they have their own feelings about your trajectory. But then when you come into a corporate world, or you walk into an office, and everyone else has been prepped for this by their families, and their families, they're the ones that told them, go to school, become this, do that, instead of becoming a doctor. They were like, be a high powered CEO, start your own business, do all of these things. And then you get there and they're like, what do you mean? What do you mean you don't feel, you know, comfortable in the office and doing presentations in front of everybody, and that find it difficult to just sit in your little cubicle for 8 hours and work, or whatever it is. And they don't understand the journey of being the first. And so you're set in this middle part where no one gets you. And sometimes there is more shame in telling someone, hey, I'm from a background of XYZ, or, I'm a first generation, or I, grew up on food stamps. And that is hard to other yourself in, when all you want is to feel a part of something.
There's something really interesting about that, because when you interact with other people, they each bring their background and their perspective, and of course, the way they were raised, and all of the elements and circumstances of their life. So too, the person standing across from you brings all of the elements and circumstances from their own life. And we have a tendency as individuals to assume that when we're meeting somebody, we're meeting them on the individual level. Like Abigail, I'm meeting Leah. We can have a conversation. We're both, white female professionals somewhere in the middle-ish of our lives. And like, we should have plenty to talk about. Okay. The same assumption can be made if I walk into any room of business women or business people. We should all have plenty to talk about. When I moved to the United States, and specifically to Atlanta, I started engaging a lot in the Black business community in Atlanta. People have grown up in all kinds of circumstances, in all kinds of places. And the conversation of their background, the conversation of where they were raised, is totally swept under the rug and almost a non issue. So you have Black successful businessman who has multiple 8-figure businesses who grew up in the hood and nobody from his hometown understands how or why he got to that position. He has particular pressures, financial pressures, family pressures, socioeconomic pressures, different types of trauma, different types of money background, different types of stuff. He and I meet each other in a business room. If I come in with the assumption that he and I are, I don't know, but like I was going to say on an equal playing field, which is correct and not correct, like that we're stacked with the same deck, I'd be incorrect. Even though I am also an immigrant to the United States, and even though I also had to receive this kind of assistance or that kind of assistance or go through this process or that process, I grew up in tremendous privilege, tremendous financial privilege, financial security, lots of education, the ability to see a very big world around myself. I speak multiple languages. There are resources and skills and tools that I have that the person sitting across from me, they don't lack those tools and skills because they're stupid. I went to a private school that taught me 3 languages. You went to a tier 1 school that did its freaking best.
Yeah, exactly. And that is in that room of professionals, it's something that people are scared to talk about. And they make the assumption that no one will understand. And it's it's interesting. I mean, I'm not a physician or, making 8 figures, but, going into grad school, it was it's interesting to see the gatekeeping with even even within the counseling field, because you have to be able to afford grad school. You have to be able to get through your supervised hours and do all of these things in order to even be in this position. And I don't think that people look at the mental health field and think about that either, of that was a sacrifice to get there. I think people look at the session fee or they look at their insurance or whatever, and they assume, oh, they're just overcharging, or, whatever their thoughts are. But it is hard. And I was lucky enough in that time of my life to be surrounded by people that allowed the safety to talk about those experiences. And I think that helped me grow into the professional that I am, because I am a first generation professional. I did grow up on food stamps. I am from a tiny ass town in the middle of Kansas. The fact that I had to fight to get out of that, people don't understand. I still remember when I was graduating high school and I told one of my teachers that I was going to become a counselor. And she said, "But you have to go to grad school for that," because I was not born on the right side of town. So it's not something we're making up. It's not something that, people don't have assumptions or don't have prejudices towards others. It is also the value that you're putting on that too. That makes me lesser than. And in reality, I believe that gives you a much greater pool of experience to pull from and allows you to bring more things to the table if you're willing to accept that part of you. The other piece of that is we don't have to fit perfectly into these systems. These systems exist. These systems are probably not going to be changed much by a single person. Hopefully, our generations are doing good things. But we have to figure out, how do I live my best life within the system? And that piece of what we were talking about earlier, of being overwhelmed and just doing it all, you lose the moment of introspection to say, what is important to me and what are the things that I feel are non negotiables, and how can I make those important enough to then figure out how to fit into the system. And I think that piece, you're trying so hard to be someone else's version of you that you lose out on the fulfillment of life. And one of the things that I tell my clients all the time is what would make it a thought in your head or something you say out loud when you're on your deathbed and you were just like, damn, I did a good job? What is that life? Because that's the life that you need to lead because everyone's going to be there at some point or another. And I would hate for you to say, I should have fucking quit my job, or I should have splurged for a nanny or a maid, or I shouldn't even given a shit if my dishes were clean. Like, that is what I like doing with my clients is just saying like, fuck the system. The system is going to be there. We'll worry about that later. What do you want? What is something that is going to change your life? Because no one else is going to come and change it for you. And everybody else is taking from you. Everyone else is taking your generosity and your time and your energy and all of your overfunctioning. But no one's going to turn around and give that back to you. And that's why boundaries are important because you need to be giving that much to yourself because you have a life to lead. And the one relationship that is going to last your whole life is the relationship with you. And it has not been on the the front of your mind at all in the last 20, 30, 40 years.
And everything that we're comparing ourselves to is only from the perspective of what we don't have from our perception. I had a fascinating conversation with somebody. We were talking about our different upbringings. And he was telling me how his family grew up very, very poor, that they were on food stamps. Mom worked like 4 jobs. She was constantly gone. And we were just talking about our different childhoods. Like, that was never an issue in my house. We always had food. My parents worked very hard. They worked long hours. They weren't home or like during my waking hours, but we had money. And as we were talking, I was like, well, tell me about like your house. Like, how did it feel? What was it like? And he was describing such a fun house, like a loving house full of where they would eat together and play together and play games together and talk to each other. And he always knew that somebody had his back. And I was like, okay, so like, let's pause for a hot second because your whole life, your whole childhood, you're looking at somebody who has more money and doesn't have to struggle from one wheel to another, which is a huge need. I was looking at like families that hugged each other and told each other they loved each other. That's not comfortable in my nuclear family. As a human being, but was I brought up more or less privileged because I had more money and less love and you had less money and more love? I don't know. I'm never going to know.
Yeah. I always say nobody comes out of childhood unscathed. We all have our shit. We all have that thing that we saw someone else have and we didn't have. And we take a lot of our own shit for granted. I think that's just kind of human nature. We don't often look at our lives with gratitude and to say, like, I'm so happy that I, you know, have so many people around me or that I had this great meal or that I am financially privileged. And I think there's a lot of shame in that too. Like, on top of all the other things we're talking about, somebody who's first generation American or first generation professional doing financially better means that you're supposed to take care of the other people. Like, okay, so you're making six figures. You need to be giving back to your parents, or you need to, help your sister out with, buying a new washing machine or whatever. Like, you're kind of the family hero now. And so you worked really hard against all of the same barriers and mountains to climb that everybody else. But once you get up there, you're now bound by obligation to turn around and give all of that stuff to your community. Living in a very individualistic culture, that is not something that we are used to doing. People in more collective cultures, like they'll do that no problem because money means something different. And I think that we we see money and we lose emotion. And that is the sacrifice. If you want to make more money, you have to give more of yourself or, do more, be more, or whatever. But also, when you look back and the people who are not, professionals in your life and where you come from, maybe they're blue collar, maybe they, are stay-at-home mom or whatever, they don't have that money part within them that's like, "Oh my god, I need to achieve, I need to have more, do more, be more." And they also learn to be happier with what they have. And so it's almost like 6 one way, half dozen another,
Mhm.
and everybody has something. And we just have to learn to deal with the thing that we have and, figuring out those dynamics and how you want to live it. That's what I mean about, you have to figure out what is going to be a good life to you. If you make 6 figures, do you want or multiple 6 figures, do you want to go on trips all the time or do you want to make a college fund for your nieces and nephews? Like you get to decide that. And in counseling, in our room, in our session, we have no judgment. So if you want to say, I want to go on a fucking safari, have fun. Go ahead and go do that. And you've worked and you've earned it. But then there's the shame of, but I could be doing more for the other people. And that's one of the things that we definitely have to dig through. The other piece that we have to dig through is what if I became a professional because I was supposed to? Like you're supposed to become a doctor. Like what is wrong with you?
Oh, well.
And they have to deal with what if I did become a doctor and I hate it?
Yeah.
And I've had so many people who are like, I went into tech, I went into accounting, I went into all of these different things. I was supposed to make money. That was my purpose. And now I am fucking miserable and I need help. And that's the other piece of it is sometimes you can achieve and you can have their support and you can do all of the things, but you feel empty. And that emptiness is also part of that when you're on your deathbed. Are you going to be like, I'm so glad that I was a CPA for 30 years and had a stressful first quarter all the time? Like, that is, I mean, I don't know anybody who is like, really loves taxes and just passionate about that. But if you are, that's great. And that's the place you need to be.
Yeah.
But for people who are miserable, you have to start thinking about how could I be happy? And I hear a lot of excuses. It's the kids, it's the house, it's the mortgage, it's the, all the obligations I have now. And creative problem solving. That is like my number one thing that I feel like I bring to the table for my clients is I'm like, "So why didn't you do this?" And they're like, "Oh, I never thought of that." And I'm like, "Yeah,
Mhm.
that's possible. You could do that."
We are used to our life being like a Robert Frost poem. You get to the fork in the road and you need to pick one and that's the way it is. No. You can go backwards, off path, up a tree, you could sit down, you could make a snow angel, you could do literally any myriad of things that maybe we haven't considered because it's not the path that's right in front of us. And when you're talking about the shame, there's like a fear element also of judgment, of what people are going to think of me, of just I'm scared.
Right.
I know that if I can just like do enough stuff fast enough, then I'll be okay because I won't feel scared.
Mm.
How
Yes.
common is that?
That is our overfunctioners. That is, I mean, I don't have the real statistics, but I'll make one up. I would say 50% of all relationships because we have an overfunctioner and an underfunctioner. And that fear is what we have to dig into of like, what are you afraid of? And is that real? Because we think a lot of things and we believe a lot of things that aren't true just because our brain says it. And I always tell my clients, you're allowed to change your mind. If you thought you wanted to be a ballerina and now you want to be an accountant, you can do that. And honestly, I love being a counselor because I love meeting all of my clients and all of their stories and the things that they have done. I think it is so amazing. And I've had the privilege to meet so many people who have done amazing things that they don't even give themselves credit for. And it is just so eye-opening to have someone tell you their story and you're like, "You did what? Oh my god, that is so cool. Tell me more about that. Like, I really just wanna know. How did you get into that?" And, that part, I think people feel shame because that wasn't supposed to be on the path. They went and they did that and they had to rectify it. And it's like, you don't have to rectify anything. This is your life. You do whatever the fuck you want. Like, you don't have to go to work today if you don't want to. Like, literally turn around, go home, lay in bed. Like, people forget the autonomy and the choice that they have because they're in the system. That's what the system does, is it makes us obligated to others. And you don't have to. You can you can change your mindset. You can change your job. You can change your hair color. You can change the city you lived in. You're allowed to do that because you have to figure out what is a fulfilling life for you.
That's such a good place to end. Before I let you go, if somebody is listening right now and they feel a little stirring of recognition in their gut, possibly, should you go straight for support, or is there something that you need to figure out first? This is what I hear from a lot of people. I'm going to preface this by saying, for the listeners, I hear a lot 100%, I will definitely sign up with you. I just have to first.
Right. And it's the self created barriers. So I would actually say a little bit of the opposite is that I would take a minute and reflect, really see how much of your life, your to do list, your energy is yours, and how much of it is someone else's. And then figure out which one of those is actually a choice and something that you could change your mind on. Even though you said you were going to be room mom for this school year, you can change your mind. And that can be off your to do list. Or you can start thinking creatively and you can say, what is out there to help me in this time frame? Because there's a lot out there. And I could think of a couple of things that would be helpful. One would be support, having someone to help you. That is kind of crisis mode right now. I have to get this shit done. But the other one is the long term, which is more counseling and therapy and digging into yourself to figure out how can I live my best life? And it's okay if you're not doing that today. You can get there if you are willing to do some work and maybe have some uncomfortable moments of either reaching out for help, telling someone no, doing something self indulgent, and really start to harness that piece of yourself, those values and that fulfillment so that you can function in this system. And long term, you may need more support than other people. Maybe you do need an assistant for until you retire. You're like, you know what? I just can't do this. Or you don't want to. You're like, I actually just don't want to look at my emails every day. You don't have to. There's people out there who can do that. And that is just an option. You can opt out of anything if you want. And you have to decide where is the heavy hitter. And that is going to take some time and start pushing your energy towards things that are fulfilling. Like, you know, kids are a lot of obligation, but they also are a lot of joy. Like you were talking about this man you were having a conversation with. Kids are so innocent and just so joyful. And yeah, you may not have a lot of money or you may not have these, that, or the other. Kids don't care. They'll just go out and play. And you're putting that pressure on yourself to say they need private lessons or they have to go to all the birthday parties or have the best clothes. And so you can affect that system too. Start putting your energy where it makes the most sense for a fulfilling life.
Y'all, If this episode hit a nerve, and I'm guessing for some of you it did, because it definitely did for me, Leah works with high achieving women who are tired of performing. Her practice is at counselingwithleah.com. And you can find her on Instagram. We'll drop all of those links for you as well in the show notes. You don't have to go hunting for it. It is right there for you. Thank you so much. Genuinely, this hit for me definitely right now, because there's a couple of things that I've been holding onto very tightly for the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years, and I finally gotten to a point where I feel like I can hand them off reliably, because sometimes certain things just require my skill set. Like, they're not ready to be handed off to somebody else until you get to a specific point. And as entrepreneurs, we do all kinds of crazy, weird things that are high risk and don't suit everybody very well to live in that type of high risk, like high octane life. But when the time came to delegate the task over and to hand the task over, the relief that I felt was overwhelming, because I was like, there's like a part of me that can breathe right now. And then the person who was accepting the task from me said, you hide that really well. Like, I know I do, but like, I'm so glad I don't have to anymore, because I've been dying.
Yeah.
And like, just in this little area of my life, because I have a lot of support and a lot of systems and a lot of things set up everywhere else. And so somebody who is acutely like in this ball pit of like, just like everything's collapsing down on you, because it's one tiny thing and one tiny thing and one tiny, the balls are filled with air. There's no reason that you should feel like you're suffocating if you get covered in a ball pit. But somehow it totally feels like drowning.
Yeah. And I also think like that is exactly right. Like when you're in a ball pit, it's terrifying. And,
Right.
if you're on the bottom and you can't get up, like, yeah, there might be plastic balls filled with air, but that is a lot to you. And we have to learn to validate ourselves and our experiences and our feelings and not just push it off and say, well, I should be doing this or I am expected to, so I have to. Like, validate your own self, validate your feelings. Know that something is overwhelming, know that something needs to go and make a plan. It sounds like that's what you did. You knew something
Yeah.
was
Like, I need to get to this point, at which point this will be safe to hand off to somebody else. That's my plan. I need to get to that point. Am I going to get to that point? Yes, because I have no other choice. Will I get there with plan A or B or C or D? I don't know. Sometimes I make it to plan W before I hit something reliable, and that's okay too.
yeah,
But that ability for me to pivot and do and like micro iterate has saved me from my own insanity.
for sure. Being flexible and adaptable is one of the greatest skills you can have.
And it was a hard one. It was definitely a hard one to learn. But squirrels, just to leave you off, like as always, you are not broken. The system is, which means that we can build something better. And building a better one doesn't necessarily start with quitting your job or having the conversation with your mother or like torching the thing and starting over. It starts with a quiet decision today, which is stop calling your performance who you are. That is the first ball to put down. And I promise you, it's just you to yourself. I promise you, nothing is going to fall when you lay that down really quietly. That's it for me today, y'all. Bye, squirrels. We'll see you next time.